Many people get into relationships with dismissive avoidants or fearful avoidants and have no idea about avoidant baselines and ceilings. So today, I'm going to teach you what you need to know. At some point in a relationship with an avoidant partner, something changes. In the beginning, they are engaged, responsive, and emotionally present. There is warmth, there is momentum. It feels like the connection is building naturally. Then, without a clear reason, the interaction reduces. Communication becomes lighter, less frequent. Emotional depth drops. Most people try to explain this by looking for something they did wrong. That is where the confusion begins. This pattern is not situational, it is regulatory. Avoidant attachment operates within a range, and that range has two parts, a baseline and a ceiling. The baseline is the level of connection someone can sustain without strain. The ceiling is the highest level of closeness they can access before their system pulls them back. Both are real. The mistake people make is assuming the ceiling is where the relationship is heading, when in reality it is a temporary upper limit. If you want to understand how a relationship will develop, you need to identify both. The first step is to identify the baseline without interpreting it. The baseline shows up when nothing special is happening. No pressure, no novelty, no emotional intensity, just normal interaction. Look at how often they initiate contact. Look at how much depth is present when things are calm. Look at whether they ask questions about you or whether the conversation stays light and contained. For example, you may be dealing with someone who messages consistently but keeps everything brief. There is contact, but it does not expand. There is engagement, but it does not build. That is a baseline. It can feel like interest. It can look like something is there. It also has a limit. That baseline matters more than any peak moment because it reflects what is naturally sustained. The second step is to identify the ceiling without projecting onto it. The ceiling shows up under specific conditions. It often appears when the interaction feels light, controlled, or unpredictable. At this level, the person becomes more engaged. Responses are quicker, the tone becomes more playful. There is more back and forth. It can feel like they are leaning in. This is where people assign meaning. They see this increase and assume the relationship is progressing. What you are actually seeing is the upper limit of their range. It is what they can access. It is not what they will maintain. If someone only becomes highly engaged in certain conditions and then returns to a lower level, that is not growth. That is a fixed range. The third step is to observe the return to baseline. This is the most important part. Every avoidant returns to baseline. What matters is how quickly it happens and what it looks like. After a period of higher engagement, watch what follows. Does communication reduce? Does openness disappear? Does the interaction reset without acknowledgement? That return is not caused by something you did. It reflects how their system manages closeness. Once you see this pattern more than once, you are no longer looking at isolated moments. You are looking at structure. The fourth step is to observe the range without forcing it. You do not need to apply pressure. Pressure distorts the result. Instead, stay consistent and watch what they match. If you maintain a steady tone, do they meet you there? If you introduce some depth, do they engage or deflect? If their engagement only increases under specific conditions and then drops again, you are seeing the limits of what they can sustain. The fifth step is to draw a clear conclusion. At this point, you have enough information. You have seen what they maintain. You have seen what they can access. You have seen how they regulate after closeness. The question is simple. If this baseline is what you experience most of the time, and this ceiling appears occasionally, does that dynamic work for you? This is not a question about potential. You cannot build a relationship on what someone shows you at their ceiling. You are in a relationship with what they sustain. Now, it is important to understand that this range looks different depending on the type of avoidant. A dismissive avoidant usually operates within a narrower range. Their baseline is steady but emotionally limited. Their ceiling includes more warmth and engagement, but the difference is subtle. A fearful avoidant operates within a wider range. Their baseline can feel inconsistent. Their ceiling can feel intensely connected, even vulnerable. That contrast creates a more confusing experience because the difference between their baseline and ceiling is much more pronounced. In both cases, the same principle applies. The baseline defines the relationship. The ceiling creates variation. It adds moments of connection, moments of intensity, moments that make it feel like something meaningful is happening between you. But it does not replace what is consistently there. This can get people stuck. They respond to the ceiling as though it is the direction of the relationship, while living most of their time inside the baseline. That creates a dynamic that feels engaging enough to stay in, but not fulfilling enough to feel settled in. So the question you need to ask is very direct. If this baseline is what you are going to experience most of the time, and this ceiling is the most you are going to get occasionally, does that dynamic actually work for you? It's super important to have an answer to this question. You're not asking whether they have potential, not whether they might go back to how they were at the beginning, not whether you can say or do the right thing to keep them in that more connected state. Does the relationship, as it actually exists, meet your needs? Because once you understand baselines and ceilings, the confusion tends to drop away. You are no longer trying to work out why they changed. You are looking at what they can consistently maintain. And that gives you something much more useful than explanation. It gives you clarity. And once you have that, you can make decisions about the type of relationships that you want to be in. If you want to go deeper into this, you can find a link to my deep dive in the description.